story of the English Folk Dance and Song Society is the story of how folk music became what it is. The story of folklorists roaming the far places to preserve what was left of vanishing traditions. The story of courageous artists risking everything to prove that folk belongs everywhere great music is honored, and activists finding new ways to revive tradition in a changing world. Most of all, it is the story of generations honoring generations, seeking the root and stock of our culture, and discovering what is best about being human. After over 100 years, the Society, or EFDSS as they call it, remains the beating heart of British folk music. We are the National Development Organization for the English Folk Arts, says Director Katie Spicer. Our mission and ambition is to preserve, promote, and develop the English folk arts through education, our library, workshops for children and adults, support for artists, and working with over 800 affiliate organizations to promote folk throughout the British Isles and overseas. The story begins with the most formidable figure in the history of folklore, both by accomplishment and temperament according to those who knew him, Cecil Sharp. He sought to preserve and promote folk music and dance, particularly the social form called country dancing and the more ceremonial Morris and sword dances. The English Folk Song Society had been founded in 1898 as a center for collectors like Sharp, Lucy Broadwood, and a young composer-collector named Ralph Vaughan Williams. In 1911, Sharp founded the English Folk Dance Society, with the same mission but more emphasis on popularizing dance. In fact, it was as dance instructor that Sharp was invited to the States in 1915, where Olive Dame Campbell showed him British folk ballads she'd collected in the southern mountains. He went there preserving over 1,500 folk songs, an essential contribution to American folklore. But as much as Sharp wanted to popularize folk songs and dances, he was a purist, which often hurt those efforts. Folks out on a Saturday night wanted to have fun, not be scolded about where to put their feet or how to sing an old drinking song. But that same purism was why Sharp was such a meticulous collector and left us such a priceless legacy. After Sharp's death in 1924, people like Vaughan Williams and new Dance Society director Douglas Kennedy felt the great era of collecting was ending, and more focus should be placed on reviving folk traditions. The missions of the Song and Dance Societies merged, and so did they. In 1932, they became the English Folk Dance and Song Society, EFDSS. Kennedy replaced Sharp's purism with a welcoming smile. The society promoted local folk clubs, creating do-it-yourself kits with recordings of authentic music and simple dance books with photos showing the steps. This is music and dance from the people, Spicer says. It's about participating, not getting hung up on the whys and wherefores. They wanted people to just join in and enjoy. The society also began to promote folk festivals throughout Britain, reaching vast new audiences. Vaughan Williams risked his composing career with orchestral settings of English folk melodies at a time most critics dismissed folk as cowpat music. But he, along with composers like Percy Grainger and George Butterworth, gave crucial respectability to folk music among elite audiences who began to appreciate and support it. The 1959 Penguin Book of English Folk Songs was the chief source book and seedbed for the coming commercial revival. Its songs came almost entirely from the EFDSS Library of Folklore Collections. In the 60s, a rocker named Ashley Hutchings began to haunt the EFDSS library, searching for a more distinctly English sound for his band. Their next album replaced the usual Dylan covers and folk rock originals with songs deeply rooted in English tradition. It was called Liege and Leaf and propelled Fairport Convention to superstardom. The society remained active, but after all that, even they admit they got a little sleepy. That all changed when a new generation of folk lovers banged on their doors asking to be let in. The old society had one more revival up its sleeve, a revival of EFDSS. It's launched 2 epic projects, Take 6 and Full English, to make all its archives available online. Over 80,000 pages of traditional songs, dances, tunes, and customs. Playwright-screenwriter Lee Hall of Billy Elliot and Warhorse calls it possibly the most exciting and significant thing to happen to British folk music in at least a generation. The Society's headquarters at the old Cecil Sharp house remains the queen bee hive of the British folk world, keeper of all those collections, host of concerts, dances, classes, artist residencies, and the 25-member National Youth Folk Ensemble. We're not just about preserving, Spicer says. We want those traditions preserved so they can be an inspiration for generation after generation to do with what they will. Generations honoring generations. The Society keeps finding new ways to do its ageless job. But then this has become as much an English folk tradition as any, hasn't it? The tradition of making tradition new again. The tradition of the English Folk Dance and Song Society.